Hello, I'm Dr. Emily Foltz, and I am the Adjunct Instructor of Oboe at Washburn University. Today we're going to be going over the KMEA All-State Oboe Audition Excerpts for 2024-2025. So before we begin, I want you to review your alternate fingerings. Refer to a fingering chart if you're not familiar with any of these. We'll also include a link to some page about alternate fingerings for you to review. So this year's excerpts will be easier to play and will sound more polished if you take advantage of left F, forked F, and left E-flat/D sharp. Got to remember our enharmonic note names. If your oboe doesn't have a left F key, which is over here for your left pinky finger, then you can use forked F instead. So the basic rules for the alternate fingerings are you can use an alternate F fingering, either left F or forked F, before or after any note that uses your right hand ring finger. So you'll use either of the two alternate F fingerings before or after first octave C or low C, and the first and second octave C sharp or D flat, D, and D sharp or E flat. Again, remember your enharmonic note names. We have a lot of that in these excerpts this year. And you will use your left E flat/D sharp before or after C sharp or D flat, and sometimes also before or after low C. Again, you can refer to the link in the description for a review of your alternate fingerings. The first excerpt is from Gustav Holst's Second Suite in F for Military Band, Song Without Words. This is an oboe solo with clarinet in unison. Please also refer to the description for a list of errors in this packet so that you can correct them in your parts. And I will be playing the corrected versions. This excerpt really tests your low range playing and the smoothness and connectedness of your slurs as you play this really beautiful folk song that Holst set. The best thing to do, starting out, you want to start well right out of the gate. So practice starting that low C without cracking the note. Isolate and practice small details like that to set your audition above the rest. In order to play that low C consistently, without cracking, you'll need to make sure that you have a relaxed and round embouchure. So just, sit in your practice area and practice that low C. That second time I played that, you could hear a little bit of a crack because my embouchure wasn't relaxed enough. You can learn to self-diagnose those problems and you can teach yourself. The next thing to remember in this excerpt is when you have a repeated note under the slur, such as the two Fs in measure 2, gently re-articulate the repeated pitch. This is a song, so those two notes represent different syllables in the text. Practice using either left F or forked F after the low Cs so that you can execute the slur. Do not slide your right hand finger from the D key to the F key, because if you do that, you won't be able to slur properly from low C to F. You'll get a little tiny E between. If you're doing it wrong, it'll sound like this. You hear that little extra E in between? Make sure to use an alternate F fingering so you can slur between those two notes. Finally, in this excerpt, and all of the excerpts in this packet, use a strong and focused stream of air to connect the slurred notes. Support from your abdominal muscles. If you're using a weak stream of air, you'll hear gaps between the notes. Here's me playing with a weak stream of air, and you can hear the little hiccups between the notes. Hear how that's not very singing style? You want to make sure to really support and connect those notes as close as you can. And that will apply to most of the excerpts in the packet. The next excerpt is from Percy Grainger's Lincolnshire Posy, another setting of English folk songs. The excerpt this year is from Rufford Park Poachers. This excerpt is from the end of the movement. As in the Holst excerpts, it is imperative to use good breath support and a strong and focused air stream to execute the long slurs in this excerpt. Now look at the key signature. We have 5 flats. There are many D flats. So go through the excerpt and mark all of the E flats that precede or follow a D flat and practice using left E flat in those places. That is for your left hand pinky finger. That way you can slur between E flat and D flat without having to slide your right pinky finger between those 2 keys. Don't slide your pinky finger. When you can use left E flat, use it. Keep in mind in this excerpt that the 8th note gets the beat. So you'll count a bar, and that means a bar of 4, a bar of 5, a bar of 5, a bar of 4, a bar of 5, etc. So it starts in it with a 4 count measure. Don't play it in 2. The grace notes in measures 7 and 9 should be G naturals, not G flats. So make sure you fix that. Anytime you start an excerpt on a long note, you should know from when you breathe to begin playing what your tempo is. It's imperative that you count carefully in your head and get off the ties in time. You'll slow yourself down bit by bit if you don't get off the ties in time. Exaggerate the swells. You'll always need to do more than you think to make the dynamic changes apparent to your audition committee. And then finally, in measure 15, there's a mordant, which is a little ornament. So it starts on C, goes up to D flat, and returns to C. All you need is one quick wiggle. And you can use, to make this easier, this trill key for your left-hand ring finger, which is on the side of your oboe, to make that really easy. So it should sound like just a quick little ornament on that C. Next, we have an excerpt from William Schumann's Chester. And yes, it's pronounced Schumann. He was an American, and he used an anglicized pronunciation of his name. This comes from the end of Chester. The piece begins with the titular hymn tune in an unadorned chorale setting, and Schumann transforms it throughout the piece until it reaches this quick, highly chromatic version. The original tune was composed by the early American composer William Billings, who's considered the first American choral composer. Chester was published in Billings' 1778 collection, The Singing Master's Assistant. It has patriotic lyrics in support of the American colonies, which were fighting for independence from the British at this time in the Revolutionary War. So if I play the original tune, you can hear how Schumann then kind of ornaments it and uses little fragments of it in this excerpt. So here's original Chester. So I highly recommend to listen to the whole piece. Then you can hear the melody when you're playing this very 20th century version of the melody. Before you play, go through this excerpt and mark any places where you will need to use an alternate F fingering or left E flat and D sharp so that you can slur smoothly. Next, we have another essential American composer, John Philip Sousa. The Glory of the Yankee Navy is not a march intended for marching. Sousa composed it for his operetta, The Yankee Girl, and perhaps this is why it has an uncharacteristically showy oboe part in the trio, which is where this excerpt comes from. You may want to select your reed for the audition based on its ease in speaking on the tongued low notes in this excerpt, such as in bar 7 and 9. Remember, just as you used a relaxed, round embouchure to successfully and beautifully play the low C in the Holst excerpt, you will need to do the same to play the low tongued notes here. Remind yourself as you play, relaxed embouchure, relaxed embouchure. If you tighten up, those notes will just go instead of speaking as beautiful pitches. And make sure, so that you can play quickly, you're using left E flat before the low C in bar 7 and 9. The next selection is Barret's first articulation study from his complete method for the oboe. First, note that in measures 3 and 7, the first two notes should be E and C, not C and A. As you're preparing this excerpt, pay attention to the shift in accents in measure 4. Rather than the expected accent at the beginning of each beat, Barret shifted the accent to the last 16th note of beats 1, 2, and 3. And make sure that you practice this slowly, especially if you're not familiar with the third octave E in measure 6. I'll include fingerings for that in the link in the description. Our last selection is the 6th of Barret's 40 Progressive Melodies, also from his complete method for the oboe. This one is a really beautiful tune, one of my favorites. Make sure to play beautifully and make dramatic, dynamic contrasts. Barret played in an opera company in London, and a lot of his music is very operatic, showy, dramatic. So really get in that kind of operatic mindset as you're performing this excerpt. The RF in bar 3 and other places is short for rinforzando, which in Italian means reinforced. Essentially accent the notes marked RF. Well, thank you for watching my KMEA excerpt video. I'm, again, Dr. Emily Foltz from Washburn University. If you're interested in a lesson or a tour of campus, feel free to send an email to me. My contact information will be in the description. Thank you, and keep practicing.